In this episode of Compliance Into the Weeds, Tom Fox and Matt Kelly take a deep dive into the Oracle FCPA enforcement action. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back again with Matt Kelly for another episode of Compliance Into the Weeds. You might say we're the Recidivist podcasters because today we're talking about recidivist FCPA violators, and today the winning ticket belongs to Oracle, who had an FCPA enforcement action announced last week from the Securities and Exchange Commission. So, Matt, we have another recidivist. We have Oracle behaving badly in ways that perhaps they've done before. You wrote about it. I'm writing about it. You want to set the stage for us so then we can pontificate.
Sure. So this was interesting because, as you said, it was a second-time offense for Oracle from the Securities and Exchange Commission. And we all know it's a second-time offense because the SEC even put that detail right in the headline of its press release. Clearly, the SEC wanted people to notice that this was a second-time incident for Oracle. What happened in very brief detail is not stuff we have not heard before in FCPA land. It was misconduct that happened in emerging markets in the 2010s. So Oracle had subsidiaries in India and Turkey and the United Arab Emirates. And basically, they invented this scheme of sham discounts and marketing reimbursement plans where the resellers working with the subsidiaries would request these very large discounts and Oracle headquarters would approve them. Of course, the discounts never actually went to the end customer. They ultimately wound up as kickbacks to the customers instead. So to that extent, we have heard that sort of dynamic many times before. But when all was said and done, Oracle wound up having to pay $23 million in fines and penalties. Out of the $23 million, 15 of it was an actual monetary penalty. The other, $8 million or so, that was disgorgement, that was interest, all the other usual stuff. But what is especially interesting is the recidivist angle here is that in 2012, Oracle had also settled with the SEC about bribery and corruption in India. And in that instance, they paid only $2 million compared to the $23 million this time around. But back then, I think it was a different sort of a scam where they were using, I think it was distributors who were selling licenses overpriced, and then some of that money was parked in secret accounts or something. It was not quite like the slush funds that we have seen this time around, as I understand it. But Oracle did not get a compliance consultant or a monitor or anything like that. It did not even have to admit to the findings in the SEC settlement order, which it did not do. We had the typical neither would confirm nor deny the findings. But everybody is very curious because the Justice Department said just a couple of weeks ago that recidivist behavior will be looked at very sternly. Now, that was the DOJ, not the SEC. DOJ has not yet taken any action against Oracle for this. We don't necessarily know that they will. But here we all are wondering, are we going to see the Justice Department come out swinging against Oracle because it's a two-time offender? I don't know, but that's the nickel tour of the case.
The prior 2012 Oracle FCPA enforcement action in India actually had a similar bribery scheme mechanism because it was payment of money for advertising. What we did not have in the prior order was a detail of how the slush fund was generated as we had in the 2022 order. So we even had a similar bribery scheme in the same country yet again. Before we get to the juicy stuff that you ended with, Matt, I thought there were some important lessons for policies and procedures because, as you noted, there was a policy in place. The procedures seemed to be somewhat lacking. The policy basically said there were, for discounts given to distributors, it's a sliding scale of internal corporate review. If it is at a level, which none of these levels were named in the order, but at some low level, individual business unit could grant the distributor a discount. As the distributor discount level increased, they had to have increasingly higher level. It appeared a second level was at a broader geographic region because one of the approvals was given by a Oracle employee in France. And then we had final highest level of discount approval had to be given by the corporate home office, which to my shock, I found Oracle's headquartered in Austin, Texas. I always thought it was a California corporation, but another Texas FCPA recidivist. What are we going to think about that? The policy was substantive and well thought out. The procedure, however, said that when you submit this, you are supposed to attach documentary evidence supporting whatever the claim or basis for the discount is. However, the reviewer who could review that information had no ability to request that information. And that almost seems counterintuitive, but the way it worked out was you could submit a request with no supporting documentation and you were within the policy. And the reviewer could approve being within the policy. It really speaks to, if you're going to require documentation for approval, you have to have a mechanism to enforce that requirement, and that enforcement mechanism is non-approval of a request without appropriate documentation. So I thought that was a lesson, certainly for the compliance professional, in the policies and procedures and perhaps internal controls. Did you see anything else in that part of the order which we could point out for our compliance colleagues?
The same point jumped out to me, actually. A lot of the third-party risk apparatus Oracle had in place, like at an abstract level, looked pretty good. The subsidiaries could not work with any third parties that had been, say, removed from the Oracle Partner Network, which is a big network. And to get into the Oracle Partner Network, you had to go through this due diligence process that was supervised globally to assure due diligence standards across the entire enterprise. That's all pretty good. But Tom, to your point there, you could provide that documentation to that, yes, we want to offer this discount for all the approvers, but the approvers didn't necessarily have any ability to require that. And everything unravels right at the end. I have talked about this before, that it's the importance of documentation, that you really want to design policies and procedures so that when you do grant something that might seem excessive, or you want to approve an override of internal controls, I'm not opposed to any of that per se, but you want enough required documentation so that decision to grant the big discount, to override the internal controls, that sticks out like a sore thumb. Anyone will be able to see it. Anyone would be able to understand your logic in deciding to grant that issue, whatever it was, and you wouldn't be able to hide it. And so others would be able to see that this looks like a whitewash and I'm going to call the hotline. I've talked about that many times before, whether it is on management's use of important estimates for financial metrics or something going into the 10K or the 10Q, could apply just as easily here about granting discounts to third parties or to resellers. It's all about, do you have a documentation requirement, not a request, a requirement that will force everybody to lay it all out and nobody would be able to question it. Oracle did not have that, and here we are. And we should say there's one other juicy little thing here, is that to top it off, after all of that third-party shenanigans and resellers and requests and not all of this other stuff, we have a good old-fashioned junket included in the settlement order for foreign government officials. Apparently, an Oracle employee from Turkey was bidding on a government project in Turkey, flew 4 Turkish government officials to California, supposedly to meet senior executives at Oracle HQ, which I always thought was in California. That's where the meeting was. The meeting was all of 15 minutes, and then the rest of the week, those 4 foreign government officials were wined and dined with trips to Napa Valley and a theme park in Los Angeles, which sounds to me like Disneyland, but they don't say which theme park. But come on. It's a week-long junket to meet with Oracle for 15 minutes. This happened in 2018, not in 2005, when we didn't really know it was illegal or not, or in bad taste. And it was Oracle's second brush with FCPA issues. And we have this junket thing that just, you got to be kidding me, that happened. So we would be remiss if we did not include that eye roller of a bit of misconduct in this case.
Before we get to the recidivist issue in a little more detail, there's a couple of other lessons I think were important for the compliance professional, and that's what led to the final order of $15 million penalty plus disgorgement and, of course, no corporate monitor or oversight, because the order specifies that Oracle self-reported certain unrelated conduct, the remedial action it took and the cooperation it afforded. That cooperation included turning over its internal investigation, voluntarily providing translation of key documents, and facilitating staff requests for interview, and then a long list of remedial actions. And Matt, here I'm just going to read from your Radical Compliance blog post, because there's a fair level of detail that we don't typically. Firing employees, including senior managers involved in the conduct, terminating resellers and distributors involved in the scheme, creating and staffing 15 new compliance roles, both at Oracle headquarters and overseas, enhanced audit functions, introducing measures to improve the level of expertise and quality of the partner network, and substantially reducing the number of partners in the network, implementing data analytics for the compliance program, and revamping the training and communications provided to employees about ethics, compliance, and anti-corruption efforts. And I guess the question I want to pose in all that is, certainly self-disclosure, cooperation, and remediation are well known once you get into an investigation. But with that, could that level of detail in the remediation have been something that influenced the SEC's thinking around the penalty involved, lack thereof, and the lack of a monitor, and then maybe lead that into the lack of the monitor and how that tracks with what we heard from the DOJ 2 weeks ago? This is Tom Fox again. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Compliance Into the Weeds. Compliance Into the Weeds was recently honored by W3 as a top podcast in business for 2022. I hope you'll join Matt and I again next week for another episode as we take a deep dive, literally going into the weeds for a compliance topic. Compliance Into the Weeds is a production of a Compliance Podcast Network.